As everyone's settling in, I will introduce our first guest here. Excited to kick off the first of the fireside chats that we're having here in the office. I always love getting together this community of folks to just talk shop, talk about revenue cycle. There's so much change, both from a technology side, from business and operations, and being able to network with like-minded folks is really great and builds a great community here at the Adonis office. I'll introduce our first guest here. Like I said, Garland. He has quite an illustrious career across his current role as VP of Revenue Cycle at Cardio One, and he oversees charge compliance, revenue preservation and enhancement, and as well as value-based care and integrity. He's had leadership roles across a number of different organizations as well, both for-profit and nonprofit, across Advanced Care, Duke, UNC, quite a few others. So thank you, Garland. Excited to have you here.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Through each of these fireside chats, given we're at the tail end of 2025 here, we're going to be doing a little bit of a retrospective on how the year went. Of course, a lot of change within revenue cycle. Thankfully, no clearinghouse outages this year, but that being said, quite a bit else. And we'll also take a look into the future. So 2026, what you're expecting and kind of where things are headed. But yeah, I would love to start, Garland, with 2025, kind of what were you seeing more macro perspective? What sort of change were you focusing on and how were you spending your time?
Sure. Can you hear me okay? Yep. Awesome. No, thanks, Dan. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate the invite. 2025, not as tumultuous as 2024, but still quite challenging in the revenue cycle space, as you can imagine. In essence, I would have to say the biggest challenges for us have always been the payer-provider dynamic. That should be kind of top of mind of any provider organization as we really look at to understand the different variability of their plan types and just I would have to say, rigidity of how they're denying claims, are looking at clinical documentation with a fine-tooth comb. And how best do we overcome that from a revenue cycle standpoint, right? Do we put bodies towards that? We put tech towards that? So that has been kind of one of our thorns in our side, if you will, that payer plan dynamic and the variability and just the overall scrutiny of any and everything that we submit to the payers. Another big challenge I would have to say is kind of the workforce in and of itself. Knowing and understanding the revenue cycle person of yesterday is not the one of today or tomorrow, just because of the evolution of not only the technology that's present, but just the nature and the business of healthcare in and of itself. As the payers adopt these different triggers or AI models for edits or just systematic down codings, things of that nature, there's no way that we can operate in the past. Therefore, the skill set of that individual is definitely going to have to be different and may have to be niche-based, so very coding-related, clinical documentation improvement, denials heavy, probably even more seasoned on the analytics side, and being able to evaluate large amounts of information, but really be able to pivot and understand trends on how to best to resolve that as fast as possible. So looking for more proactivity, and I know we'll get to that in 2026. Another component I would have to say has been kind of technology as well. So as much as healthcare and some of the C-suite individuals want to implement technology in the revenue cycle space, if in fact the strategic plan isn't articulated or communicated and bought in by the masses, the rollout and ROI is going to die on the vine. Therefore, understanding what needs to be communicated, how expectations are going to change, and then understanding how you retool or redevelop your workforce to accept and adopt some of that technology is going to be the key to success. But
yeah, I love all that. We were actually just talking to a customer today who said they have 18,000 work queues, which I think really illustrates the problem. And imagining trying to assign work and think about each of these work queues being a body of work, it's just impossible to manage. I'd love to drill into the payer point a little bit. We talk a lot here, Adonis, about leveling the playing field. And of course, it's very difficult to do because there's constant policy changes, and then the policy change will reference your contract, which will reference another policy. And how do you stay on top of all that? I'm curious, how are you setting up your teams best to succeed and really make sure that they're kind of operating within the bounds of what payers define?
No, great question. And so we've been talking around about this topic in many of the associations or agencies. I was at a thought leadership meeting in, I want to say, DC with HFMA, maybe in September. Was on another conference with Connex, with the Revenue Cycle Innovation Board. And this topic is always top of mind, simply because we're looking for shared best practices on how we address this, whether you're a small, medium, or large provider organization. I've found advantages in kind of a payer performance scorecard. And so really monitoring and tracking at the payer plan level how they're performing relative to our contract. But doing so can be quite the lift if you do not have the technology enabled. And so deploying some type of AI that lets you identify when an underpayment of your contract has been made, and pinpointing exactly who the payer is will help us facilitate a conversation with that payer around different negotiations and tactics on revising our contracts. But nevertheless, really holding them accountable to the terms of their contract. Hey, you said you were going to pay us X percentage for these Medicare Advantage plans. You're not doing that. I just said you were going to, accept this amount or percentage of clean claim rates. You're not doing that. And so really holding them accountable for the outcomes that they said they were going to do or have done. We also have gone as far as to bring in the insurance commissioners of the respective states. So really understanding and knowing your power as a provider organization and leveraging that. Most payers don't want to be in the news. It's therefore sending demand letters and CCing the insurance commissioner often finds its value and success. So I had to do that a couple of times in my career, but maybe threatened a few more times, but it works. And therefore it really, again, it's a mutual accountability. And so rather it be an adversarial relationship, definitely want it to be mutually and collaborative. But again, it has to be a conversation up front first.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And there's been a particular payer in the news, which I won't name, with regards to downcoding recently, and quite a few trends around downcoding. I'm just curious, kind of what have you seen in terms of the impact of downcoding in the past year?
Yeah, good. No, great question. It's really identifying the once a claim submitted and the remark code that comes back. So it's a very specific finite field that one must know and understand the why behind a reduction in coding. And so you don't, if you're getting, tens of thousands of claims, it's challenging to find that, particularly if, that company's different plan is not going to downcode for their Medicare Advantage. So setting up different, not the 18,000 work queues, but setting up logic, algorithm in the system that pinpoints not only that payer, but when we have this particular remark code, let's move that aside and escalate that as a denial reason. We haven't seen as many here as of recently this year. I know many of the medical associations lobbied to have that prevented, but some of the others have been doing that, particularly in the inpatient space for quite some time. And they took a similar model, really identifying specifically what comes back on the claim and then escalating that to the payer and providing that clinical documentation so that, that rework is then reimbursed accordingly to the contract.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And my favorite trick is when they don't provide the remark code, yet they downcode anyways. And you're expected to catch it. But yeah, maybe let's turn to 2026. I think we're at a really interesting inflection point, especially with the advance of technology. There's been a lot of promises over the last decades around automation, that some of which been realized, some of which haven't. But yeah, it's a really, really kind of perfect time of where the industry is heading and with the advent of this AI technology. But I'm curious to get your perspective. What are you most excited about for 2026 in revenue cycle?
Awesome. Good question. Excited that it'll be a new year. Not very excited that insurance will reset. And there are some insurance plans that are exiting certain markets. And, it's going to be challenging because there are going to be certain, locations and impacts, particularly to the revenue cycle. That's going to be high deductible health plans. The patient responsibility is increasing. It used to be in the low single digits percentage of your AR. Now you're looking at the high single digits, maybe even low double digits. and that is not always good for business. So really from a tech standpoint, really identifying and getting the front end right, understanding how best do we either partner with technology or recruit and hire the necessary associate that understands eligibility, demographics, insurance. That stuff matters. Because as much as I love AI and technology, I'm not averse. It acts or functions as a garbage in, garbage out system. So if I can't give you good quality information in the beginning, how am I expected to have that outcome, resonate to the success that I need it to? So for me, it's more along the lines of identifying, let's take where we're finding the highest denials, what's our claim volume, and really narrow that focus and begin to measure the AI deployment or implementation, and continuously provide feedback to it so that it improves. And so you can feel trusted that information is correct. You're seeing the right return on investment. You can celebrate those wins. And then you now have kind of the proverbial buy-in with your group. So it's really leaning in, but understanding there still has to be kind of a governance structure to any kind of AI deployment. This isn't done in a vacuum. So revenue cycle leaders are significantly involved now in more of the strategic deployment or conversations around this, but also significantly around margin control and impact. So what degree or what impact is going to have on my margin, either from a labor perspective, are we going to see increases, decreases? And also, how are we going to retool or repurpose the staff? Because you make a commitment that you're not going to fire anyone, but does your current staff really have the capacity or capability or the competencies to embrace that technology as it is? And how much are we willing to invest in ensuring that they do so? So 2026 is going to be fun-filled, at least for the first quarter. And then we're going to move into kind of a certain area or segment to where we're measuring, again, the outcomes of that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, with any kind of automation, of course, especially historically, can actually introduce friction where it's not well aligned to what the folks on the ground are doing today. Sure. We talk a lot about as well trying to build this world of exception-based revenue cycle where folks are really focusing on those high dollar, high value, high thought kind of process tasks. And would love to drill into your points around how do you manage those workforces? How do you upskill them? How do you make sure that they're kind of operating at the level they need to heading into this new world we're entering?
Yeah. No, you're right. It's really understanding those exceptions, and it's all about reducing those exceptions as well, right? So as I have these increase or come up, from a associate director or director level, even at the manager level, what is it that we're finding, and how best can we provide training and education to those individuals so that they don't commit the same mistakes, or we're finding a reduction in, eligibility denials, or medical necessity, right? What NCD or LCD algorithm or logic we can put in the system that prevents a provider having a diagnosis CPT mismatch, right? So removing exceptions is probably priority. And then when we talk about, training and educating the team, it's really a playbook on what is it that we as an organization are going to prioritize around, understanding the insurance market better, understanding the plethora of number of insurance cards and how that gets into the system, how to leverage some of the coverage detection software that's readily available, and so forth. So it's really making a kind of a 90-day commitment in reinforcing or redeploying a lot of the investment into the human capital, and structuring them in a way to say, okay, here's the work queue, here's the exception. Let's see if we can see those exceptions decrease over the next 90 days. And here are the tools that'll help you get here, training, education, and so forth.
Yeah, I love all that. And maybe we could wrap up kind of thoughts on 2026 with those points around AI and technology. And obviously there's so much promise, but the promise needs to meet the reality on the ground. I'm just curious, how do you think about evaluating different pieces of technology? Where do they fit in, where they don't fit in, and who you work with?
No, you're right, because it really truly has to be an end-to-end revenue cycle evaluation and understanding not only could you point the macro level, but the micro level at each of the respective segments of the revenue cycle, So where am I finding the most revenue leakage? Is that on the front end? Is that in the mid-revenue cycle, or is it in the back end, right? And then prioritizing exactly how I want to address that. And for me, I've always looked at, well, who's best in breed in prior auth automation? Or who can we find that can assist with, clinical documentation improvement? Or who can provide some type of, coding assistance? I mean, it has to be something. It cannot be a complete outsource human to whereby, you still have to train and educate all the time. And then your SOPs change and so forth. So it's really it's going to take a collaborative effort. And as we begin to kind of shape and prioritize that, understanding that, C-suite buy-in, IT definitely, as well as operations and the clinical folks is going to be most important for 2026 to be successful wherever we adopt the AI.
Are there any areas, eligibility, auth, coding, denial management, any kind of pain points that you think really stick out as large opportunities?
I would have to say prior authorization is most opportunistic, simply because the payers aren't going to change their practices on how they're increasing the number of prior authorizations. Therefore, if we can combat kind of intelligence with intelligence from a systematic standpoint, that will readily free up some of the resources to give us greater capacity to focus on something more value add, whether it be value-based care or some of those, highly complex cases or what have you. So prior authorization is a good one. Denials, it's always a priority, but they're going to deny if it's there and it can move things into a work queue based upon a certain algorithm. It gives us the ammunition needed to really go back to the payer and start holding them accountable.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And maybe we could wrap things up in the name of community here. I'm just curious, advice for other RCM leaders who are trying to navigate all this complexity, both operationally and from a technology standpoint.
Run now. No, but no, seriously, right now for revenue cycle leaders, I would have to recommend that you just stay the course. With your core competencies in terms of leadership, empowering the staff, remaining resilient, because it's not going to work each and every day or all the time, but really knowing and understanding your core competencies, and then collaboratively working with those individuals that are going to focus on creating the right strategic plan, because you always need a kind of a North Star, if you will. So as we develop that North Star collectively, C-suite level or what have you, we're all on the same sheet of music. We can all kind of march to the same beat. And from there, then the subsequent staff members can then feel the buy-in, feel the trust as we move into articulating, here's where the exceptions are going to be, here's what we're going to do for you, here's what the AI should do for us. So really getting that strategic plan in place, that North Star, and sticking to that. And understanding that you have the competencies necessary to be successful.
Love that. We'll take questions from the audience, but please give a round of applause for Garland. Any questions? Thoughts, comments on downcoding?
It's interesting. That's something. There are lots of challenges, radiology and otherwise, but downcoding, one authorizations, random denials for no reason. And you mentioned statement was we had more bodies, we had knowledge. I want you to elucidate that a little further. Just everything's a cost.
Yes.
Things benefits. How do you see the interplay between?
So great question. And for myself, it's an assessment of not only my teams, but the organization's readiness level. So if there are competing priorities in operations or tech, and I know that we cannot successfully deploy the right technology to combat that, then the near-term success to preserve the revenue is going to be FTE. And so strategically, you make that decision. Then we gain the buy-in over the next 30, 60 days, and then look at the technology. But we can't afford to to let the, I guess, the wheels off the machine, fall. Therefore, the cost is very fractional from an FTE standpoint, but it's a huge commitment on my existing team to kind of train and educate them on the how and the way we do things and within the system. Therefore, you're stretching the staff thin. That could lead to, staff burnout and so forth. So you have to balance that very delicately on how much your team becomes more engaged with onboarding a new FTE versus, again, are we truly ready to accept some of the AI?
Sounds like almost insurance companies are using it.
Yes. Oh yeah, they just roll it
So
out.
almost like bots are fighting bots, and then ultimately we're putting in what's called FTEs to kind of cover the gaps or.
Yes. Yeah. So if the FTA or if the automation's already there and we're finding some kind of fallout, if you will, so 85% of it's cool and then 15%, yes, we would then have the FTE kind of upskilled to overcome those exceptions. But yeah.
Love it. Any other questions? Doug.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Maybe one question focused on automation would be consistently hear in the market. We consistently hear in the market around like the challenge in finding and recruiting kind of the next leaders across revenue cycle, right? Like almost, every other call we get asked, hey, do you know people that, that are looking or like that would be interested in like a VP or senior director role, et cetera. How do you think about as a leader yourself, like maybe finding, recruiting, retaining these folks that can take on these very important positions in healthcare in this period of rapid change?
Great question. So for me, ever since I left Capital, I've always been under the mindset of move through your role as though you're going to leave tomorrow. So it's always building a succession plan, understanding, the landscape, the competencies are now different. But to your point, recruiting and hiring revenue cycle leaders isn't easy because it's not only the core competency of the how the mechanics of the business work. That's important. The experience is important, but it's also the critical reasoning behind it. So as you think about, even with, I'll bring in back into AI, but as you think through all the CFOs or CEOs want the new AI, but who's going to be in the best position to question the integrity of that? So just like any good relationship, as you cultivate and nurture it, whether it's new or ongoing, it's all rooted in trust. And so if you don't have the right bodies at the table to, push and pull and tug around that trust to where when we begin to see the accuracy and quality increase, again, it's going to be dead on the vine. So I would say, continue to look for revenue cycle leaders that have a very, great balance and resiliency, kind of courageous cross-departmental experience, communicate effectively across executive leadership as well as physician leadership, and one that's not tech averse. There are some RCM leaders who, hey, we've always done it like this. This is the way we're going to continue. Wow. So, really embracing kind of the newness of it, and they're not afraid to kind of roll up their sleeves as well to get things done.
Amazing. We'll give one more round of applause, please, for Garland.
Thank you.